welcome to Town Line Garage. Today we're doing body work on the S10. Stick around. Hey, thanks for tuning in to Town Line Garage. Today we're working on my 1988 S10. This is the first vehicle that I've owned. Not a lot of people probably have those still around. My great-grandpa bought this brand new. My grandma had it for a little while after that. Then I was lucky enough to have help from my folks and my grandma. A bit of work, and I was able to be the third owner of this vehicle. She'd been sitting around for a while, had a number of engines in it. Not a ton of attention in recent years, but it does have a brand new V8 in it. Transmission's iffy, but it really needs body work before we go any further with anything on this vehicle. Today we're going to be digging into the floor, rocker panels, cab corner, and cab extension, maybe body mount, on the driver's side of this rig. So you can see we've gotten pretty heavily into the body work on the S10, got the entire front clip off. We're working on the floor and the driver's side rocker. We got the bed tore off, seat was loose, so we got that out of the way. The bumper for another truck just hanging out in back. We'll end up cleaning this frame up a little bit later. Working on the floor and the front part of the rocker. We'll come back, get the cab corner on this side, and then we'll move on to the passenger side. Weight reduction was fairly advanced in here. This is kind of my mock-up pose. I stared at this a while before I started cutting. I got my parts here from LMC Truck. There were some areas where I could not use the new parts as a template. Some areas were just too rusty, and I knew I'd have to cut further than what I had. A good example of that is up here. You can see I'm going to have about a 1/4 inch or so gap. I'm going to have to get a strip, cut that out of flat, and bend that into place. And then one of the pieces I wasn't able to get was up here on the inside kick panel. But that's an easy flat piece to do. I'll need another strip up here. Pardon my trash bags. This is all the way down, but it's roughly where it's going to sit. So got a bunch of dents up here from when I put a couple different V8s in here. It kind of just a little finesse was needed. Plus the first one was put in roughly 20 years ago. So I'll take these pieces out of here in a minute. Just wanted to kind of show the mock-up. Down here, you can see I did not replace everything back into this radius. It did come with a full rocker set to come all the way back up into here. But I'd rather keep factory metal if it's in good shape. So the reason why I chose this area to cut, the rust started seriously back up into here. And then this gave me a nice flat area to be able to blend and hide this in. So what I'll do when I've got everything fit up, I'll take this overlap and I'll trim both of these ideally at the same time. We'll see what I can get clamped up here. But for now, this is an open section that can fit over this. It gives me a nice way to fit everything into place. One more piece a couple more pieces I'm gonna have to make manually. That is back here. This is a hole I got cut out already, but I can bend this flat piece and we'll tack that in. It's gonna be under carpet anyway, so no big deal. You see the back side of the rockers, I'm gonna have to cut a flat piece out, because as you get back in here, the original, you can see some surface rust back in there that I'll clean. We'll cut out a flat piece of stock to close up the back side of the rockers when we're ready. But right now, we'll use that to help tack the floor in. One thing to note when you're cutting this stuff apart and mocking it up, before you cut it all apart, try and pay attention to how the joints are supposed to go together. These areas up here, they already pointed out. I'm gonna have to make my own overlap with my custom parts to how I think it's gonna be right. But back along here, for example, the floor goes underneath the rocker, and then I'll have to make a back cap for the underneath portion of that rocker. Now, I left the door in place for one main reason, aside from me being lazy, is I wanted a guide. So when I'm cutting the rocker halfway back, I wanted to be able to see the bottom of the door. Because when I shut the doors, even though I've got some bad body mounts, I still got a pretty decent line here. My body lines are lining up, so my door's closing in the right spot still. So I can use the bottom of this door to make sure that my rocker ends up straight. So in front here, I've almost got this ready to tack up. I'm just going to patch in a panel behind this hinge here. I'm not going to cut these hinges off, weld them back on. I'm just not set up to get that geometry set up how it should be. On the bottom here, you could kind of see this could really go all over the place if you don't have a reference point, and there's just too much rust on the front to have the door all the way off of here. I'd never get it back where I'd be happy with it. So what I'll do is I'll come down here when I've got my patch panels all cut out and I'm ready to tack it in. I'll get it clamped up, and I'll just take whatever, you know, whatever I got around and use that as some shim. You know, might be cut off wheel, scrap some material, and then I'll be able to kind of measure against the bottom of that door to make sure that that comes back all straight. Once I got that taken care of, I might pull off the door at that point in time to work on the rust at the bottom of that door, just so I can get it out on, you know, sawhorse or table. Kind of see what kind of overlap we got going on here. I've got a little bit of final trimming to do. So my line's roughly how much overlap is there. I'm going to take that back a wee bit, but I am going to leave an overlap. I don't know that this pan's cut for that, but the fitment is good enough up in this area. I'll figure something out back here. Since the body mount is completely gone, I like that overlap to kind of help me figure out where in space this component needs to be. Similar to the rockers, give yourself some reference point just before you cut everything out of there, because you don't have a jig to get this back to where it needs to be. Body mount is completely gone. That goes about like that. So floor panel set on top of it. I'm actually going to wait until the floor pan is welded in before I put that guy in there. I can get at it with some plug welds. I can do what I need to do. We'll be welding a fastener patch inside of this component here, so a bolt can come up through the bottom. Didn't come with this part, but we can figure it out. Again, the reason I'm not going to put this in first and try to set the floor pan on top of it and squeeze everything down is I don't want to affect where this floor ends up, where the cab ends up. I want to try and use the pieces that I've got to get this floor at the right height that it should be. Even though I'm overlapping it, it's only going to be off by the thickness of that metal. Whereas if I cut everything and just did a butt joint around the edge, I'd have a lot harder time keeping that all straight. And then unlike, you know, a side body panel where I'm going to have to worry about Bondo, I will put some zip screws in here to pull everything tight before I weld it, and then I'll come back with some seam sealer and make sure that's all sealed up good. Top and bottom. This vehicle won't see a lot of winters, but you want to keep the stuff from getting up inside that joint. Now back over here on the side, let's get this bumper out of the way here. Over here on the side, I'm going to be fixing this as well as some of that. Back here, I think I'm going to choose coming in right around where this trim is going to go back in. This is the tape left over from the factory trim. I'm going to put factory trim back on it. Nice flat surface here. This is going to get butt welded. I don't want to come into this body line and start cutting and expect that I can get that back to where it needs to be if I can avoid it. There's times where you got to do some of that stuff, but here, since my rot is down here, I probably got good metal up around here. I'll check when I start cutting into it. But if I can put my body line right around here, or my cut line somewhere in here, that'll mean my fade can go up behind that trim, and you won't be able to tell somebody that doesn't do a lot of body work did the work on this guy. So I'm not a body person. I've done a bit. Along with that, I've learned to find places to hide where you're performing your work. Alright, we're getting close to putting the floor pan in. As much as I'd like to have all of these separate pieces all the way out to the rockers ready to go, we're working on this vehicle in short chunks of time, half hour, hour, a couple hours a piece. So I've already got this area cleaned up, I got the pan prepped, and I've looked ahead at where everything's going to interface and clean those areas up too, just so if I get a piece in, I'm not getting myself in trouble later on thinking, shoot, did I clean up my edges where I'm going to put the next piece, where I'm going to weld the next piece, etc. We got inside the truck prepped. We got the pan fitted up how we like it. Going to have a combination of plug welds. You can see I got a lot of holes in here. I've got a little extra overlap in some places, and again, I'm using that to help set my geometry because there's too many pieces gone out of this floor. I'm trying to figure out where things need to go. So, pretty much everywhere but up in this heavy radius through here, I've got plug welds prepped and a fair overlap. One piece I'm going to have to cut later. There's a piece of bracing underneath here, and then a cover piece. I might combine that with a thicker piece. I might throw 10 gauge in there. I might double it up, but I can figure that out later. I've got plenty of clearance. I don't see any problem with me getting this in here first, other than the rocker. So the rocker I'm going to mock in place because that's going to help me set where this is at. I'm not going to tack the rocker in at the moment, but you got to start somewhere. Both sides of this material are ground where I've got the plug welds, and again where my future joints will be. Also came in, hit this with a wire brush real quick, some Duplicolor rust fix, as well as just some quick engine and ammo low gloss, semi-gloss, whatever I had on the shelf. Not looking for show car appearance, just the areas where I'm not going to get to later. Underneath, I can always come back in the wintertime or something after the rust is painted and do some detailing underneath the frame. Just wanted to get to the spots I'm never going to see again. Got everything ground down. I hit with flap wheel. Some places flap wheel couldn't get into, using wire brush, wire wheel. But don't try to weld over the paint. You'll get porosity. It'll be nasty, you know, unless you're working on a plow truck, and then, you know, just burn it in there. It'll be fine. One area that'll be a little tricky later is up here, but we'll just have to figure out how as we go. Yeah, down here we're gonna have a separate bracket. It's box shaped piece of sheet metal that it will actually sit on the body mount. Doing that later because I'm going to try and get this geometry as close back to where it needs to go first, as well as the rockers. And then you can, once that's rigid again, we can jack the truck up, sneak that piece in there, and there's a couple different ways I can get to those welds. What I'm going to try to do, and this is not exactly right, I've deburred these edges down here, file, sandpaper. I'm going to try and get some seam sealer in here before I zip screw this down, and I'm going to use zip screws to help clamp this together while I'm plug welding. I'm going to try and keep the heat out of it enough that I can maintain that seam sealer, because the exhaust is right up here, transmission's right there, frame's right here. I don't think I'm going to be able to get up underneath and get a good seam seal without just making an absolute mess. And I'd like to seal this edge as much as I can. I don't have any weld through primer type stuff. There's a handful of different weld through primers and different things that you can do in this joint. I'm going to try and seam seal on each side of the weld best that I can and kind of call it a day. This isn't a show vehicle restoration, but it's not quite, it's not a plow truck that we're just scabbing pieces in either. So trying to make it decent for what I can get to here in my garage. So we're going to put a little bead of seam sealer on the bottom. That might work, it might not. We'll check that later once I get it in. And I'm going to set the panel in. I'm going to put some zip screws where I see fit to suck everything down where we've got a heavy overlap. And then I'm going to come back and hit the plug welds first. And once the plug welds are in, then I'll think about getting some of the edge welds. I might even let it sit overnight, let the seam sealer dry the rest of the way on the bottom before I come back and hit any top tacks. We'll see how it goes. Give a rundown, a quick history lesson while we hook our eyeballs on the status of this old gal. If you were wondering if your ears were working right, they might have been. This is my first truck. I've had this for well over 20 years now. My great-grandpa bought this brand new, 1988. My grandma had it a little bit after that. And then I was lucky enough to get my hands on it.
when I was old enough. Came from the factory with a 2.8 liter fuel injected V6 with a 4-speed automatic transmission. It's trimmed out in red on red. Alright, so I made sure I saved this little guy here to know what the overlap looked like. It's got a little funky shape on it. I'm going to use that as a template with my grease pencil on this guy, so I know how much this overlap needs to be. Pretty happy with where I trimmed down here. I think I got it in the right spot. There's another, I got lucky, I'm just below a bulkhead connection here, so I think I need to keep this right about here. Really struggling to get this glue off of here from the molding. Man, if anybody's got a trick for that, put it in the comments. I could really use it. Trying not to dig into the metal with my grinding and sanding wheels, but it's tough stuff. Hot, cold, anywhere in between. It's just fighting me. So this is how stuff comes in from LMC truck. This is the extension panel. You can see it's got more material than what you need, and it's not necessarily cut how I need it to interface with my new cab corner back there. But I think the point is that they give you enough to work with. So what I'm going to have to do is just kind of pick a point here to start cutting back. I'm not going to impact the back side of the back wall because I got plenty extra meat here in the cab corner. I'm probably only going to use about yay much, and then slim this guy down here. So I do know I need to get this extra radius out of here, so I'm going to have a flat panel here. I'm going to use my grease pencil to trim up this edge here based on where the old one came off, and at that point I'll be able to hold this in place and get a good reference mark to do my final cut across the top. I'm going to get that guy tacked up in there, and then I'll come in and get the cab corner fitted in kind of the same fashion. I'll start trimming back in areas where I know I'll have enough extra meat, ideally so I can kind of glove fit it over the top of the old parts, and then trim back until I get that good fitment with my cut line. Ideally if I could get it laid up and overlapped and make a cut through both materials at the same time, but these parts are a little too, they've got too much form in them for that to really work out for me right now. So we're going to get you set up, speed things up a bit, and we'll see if we can't get this tacked up in here. Well, ran into a little bit of a pickle. Started getting things fit up for the extension panel. Realized side of the truck has got a little bit of a curve to it. Extension panel does not. So I'm going to get this fitted, and it just wants to kind of slab on the side and doesn't want to sit real nice. So I moved on to setting up the cab corner, because the cab corner has the radius like it should. Just something with the way they're making this guy, they're just giving you a flat sheet with the dog leg on the bottom. So I'm gonna have to do a little bit of finesse to this panel to get a little bit of an arch in it. Put it over a board or tire or something. Just do the best that I can because I don't have a lot of metalworking equipment or something like that. But we do have cab corner about ready to go in. That guy's gonna sit up in there like that. So if I would have known that, I probably would have started by chopping this piece off first, so I could maintain some structure and not have to eyeball as much of the geometry of this back corner. But instead I'm going to get this guy tacked in there, and that'll give me a little bit more form to work on that middle panel on. Before I button that up, I probably will come in here and give a little spritz of whatever I got on the shelf of paint, because I'm only going to be welding down here. I'm not going to go crazy with weld through primer. The reason is where you weld it, it's going to burn off anyway. So I'm just going to get some paint in there, some paint on the back side of my patch panels, and stay away from where I'm welding, and that's going to be about as good as I can get. I might try some of the weld through stuff later on, but not today. Getting ready to tack this guy up in here. We got some flanges tacked in here and here to kind of help keep things pulled out, especially with the radius mismatch that we got. So that guy's gonna fit in there kind of like yay. We're just gonna tack her in for tonight. It's getting late. Get that tacked in there, and that way tomorrow we can take a gander. If we don't like what we see, we still got an option to cut her back out. We're making good progress here. I liked how it sat when I came back after it was all tacked up. So I went ahead and burned this all in. 3 billion and 72.5 spot welds here. Whole bunch of little tacks stacked up, moved around as much as what I could. That's why I really wanted to get all this tacked all up, set the geometry of it, and I also had some more stuff to do inside, so that allowed me to kind of bounce around, because you don't want these panels to get hot. I'm sure I probably warped it more than a real body person would, but I kept going back and checking and making sure that I could still lay my hand on the panel. So as stuff started tightening up, I'm sure I got a little bit of warpage in here, but it's gonna have filler in it no matter what I do. So just trying to minimize that. I'm coming along pretty good. What I'm doing right now is I went by with a flap wheel, just grazing the top of it, and then came back, and I wanted to get a more level surface on here to kind of see where I was high and low. So I scraped by with a DA with I think a 40 grit, and then I'm coming back after that where I'm seeing the higher spots, and then digging in a little bit more with a small 90-degree die grinder. I think it's a 80 grit wheel on there. Trying to be cautious not to sit too much in one spot. See, I already got a little bit of a digger down here. There's gonna be filler no matter what, but right now I'm really trying to figure out where I got some pinholes, because I know I'm gonna have some. I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna fill those in and then grind that back down. There's gonna be filler in it no matter what, but just trying to keep areas where I get any moisture in the back side of where the filler and the paint's gonna be. So coming along pretty good. I'm fairly happy how this sits. Probably be using a little bit of filler for shaping this panel here, because of how flat this piece is, but it is what it is. It's as good a stuff as you can find right now. Doing a little bit better at getting the trim off of here. Got one of the little eraser wheels. That's what I should have done before. Don't do what I did here. I'm gonna have to pull this back here down to bare metal anyway, so I wasn't being too careful. But if you were trying to save this metal or save this paint, these are some pretty hard diggers in there. What not to do right there. The inside, got this rocker joint tacked up. This is kind of at the same status as this joint. I'm gonna start cutting down on all my stacks of welds just to see if I got any pinholes, where they're at, so I can start prepping that for being ready for filler. We got more metal work to do before we're really gonna slather any mud through here, but making our way. Got this little corner patched up here. That's a kind of a before picture of some gnarly patching going on. Got my extra patch up in here. It's nice to do these pieces last, because as you trim down your main panels, it's going to give you some scraps, so you're not cutting into a whole sheet. And I still got some more flopping around if I need any other pieces. I still have to cut my inner rocker down on the bottom side there. I'm gonna have to do that before I put the body mount back on, because that's gonna keep this, it's gonna keep this rigid. Kind of next stop inside here, I got these other patches. I gotta do a little bit of grinding and tickling inside here. As you can see, more area where my rocker wasn't able to go high enough, so just trying to make do. I know if you're doing maybe a proper restoration, you come up, form a whole new pillar, but this is still going to be way better than what it was when it was, you know, sitting in the yard. So I'm going to clean this up the best I can. I'm going to put this patch panel on the back of there, combination of plug weld and stitch weld. Got another guy over here. Now it'll give me a little bit of backup so I can come by and put another weld on the back side of there. This is actually the back side of our hinge, so I want to make sure that there's a good structure here for the hinge. It's not wobbling around on us right now. I can take that and muscle around, and there's really not any flex going on, believe it or not, yet. I just want to make sure that that doesn't keep going. We're going to get as much of this cancer out of here as what we can. Once I get these guys in there, I'll start prepping my panel. There's going to be another sheet that goes kind of here. And that'll also keep the floor right underneath here is where that body mount sits. So I want to make sure I've got all the structures set before I start pushing up on this section of the floor and bending anything. Once we get all that stuff squared away up here, we'll get the truck jacked up and get under there. Oh. Transmission fluid. Okay. Well, that's where we're sitting. Can't complain too much. As soon as I got this guy positioned in there when I was tacking stuff up and saw how flat this panel came, I knew that I'd have a certain amount of mud in this area. So given that, and given the number of different pieces that are in here, I'm fairly happy with where this sits right now. I'm gonna have to create some of this shape with a little bit of filler, and it's just going to be eyeball of what looks good with the door. Said a number of times, I'm not a body person, but this is going to be better than how she was sitting in the yard.
rotting it against the grass. So feeling pretty good with where that's at. Kind of came in with a straight edge here and there, just to make sure that my welds weren't going to be high points as much as possible. Do still have some pinholes to come in here and clean up. I'll do that and grind her back down. I'm not looking for, you know, that professional metalwork here. It's nice to see when it does blend together, but mainly just want to make sure that those aren't my high points, so when I come back with the filler, that I'm not going to be grinding on metal and the filler at the same time. Once I put the filler on, I'm just going to want to make sure that I'm doing that blend and that final finish. Similar story with the rocker. This is actually a low point in here, somewhat just due to the mismatch of the aftermarket panel and the OE stuff. There's just a little bit different shape. This has a little bit of a crown in it, whereas the aftermarket piece is flat to a dish. So no matter what I do here, I could have TIG'd weld this up perfectly and there would still be a mismatch in these materials. So there's gonna be a little bit of mud in here. This area will probably be fine. You're not gonna look at that hard. I'll blend this in here, but not too bad. Well, we're making some progress here. We got the truck jacked up, working on that inner rocker underneath. We got the kick panel welded in. Snake down in the creeper gear here. So here's what we got going on. Test fit number 32 out of 50. Just trying to get everything to meet up real nice. What we got going on back here, you can see my tacks on the back side. I did put another layer here, so I've got a little bit of a backer to help get this overlap to work for me. I'm gonna put this in and I'll use a screwdriver to kind of push it up, make sure we got a tight fit up here. I debated whether I make this piece with a 90 up top. Probably would have been the best thing to do, but I really didn't know how I'd hold a consistent fit up because we got these multiple joints coming together. Up here I've got my body mount snuck in, trying to make sure we got good fit up. After the inner rocker's in, this will be the next piece. You can see my thumb's going through where the bolt would be. I'll make sure that's eyeballed square and then clean up any paint where that needs to go in, and that'll be welded on there next. Just trying to make sure this has a decent fit up before I weld things in place. With the inner rocker, I think I mentioned already, I could not find inner rockers for this truck. Maybe they're out there, I just couldn't find them. Trying to figure out what I do up in here. I'd really like the inner rocker to be able to get all the way up to the floor, but this is where the floor starts pulling away, going up into the doorpost. I might come in here after I get this tacked up with a piece of angle. Maybe one of my scraps has a nice 90 on it. I can squeeze up in there. I kind of have this flared out right now. I tapped around the anvil a bit. I was going to try and see if these materials would connect. I think if I go too much further, my body mount's not going to want to go. So I'm probably going to flatten that back out a bit and then just see if one of my scraps has an angle piece I can patch in there. I didn't want the angle piece to begin with because I think that's going to interfere with this guy. This really is going to hold everything it needs to. Maybe I mark where this is at and then go just forward, because this little wobbly tang up here is what's going to bother me. So maybe I just put a little patch panel in here just to make sure this end is tied in. I might pop a drain hole down in here because the factory didn't have that, and that's probably what caused a lot of the rot down here. At least make sure that the things can drip kind of down into here. Moving right along on the inside, got the kick panel all solid. Pretty happy with how that turned out. Got some nasty looking welds to grind down here because we had to put that real skinny patch panel in there. So I'm gonna have some quality time with my die grinder in there, flap wheel, barrel, whatever I can reach. I'm sure there's some pinholes to tack up in there. But overall, we're just about wrapped up on the inside
of the driver's side, I've got to drill out and get a new seat bolt in here. I'll probably weld that in from the bottom, or maybe put a washer and weld it from the bottom if it feels still thin. And then this one last little sliver here, I wanted to get the interrocker in there, and then I'll probably patch this from the bottom. That'll kind of wrap it up for this side of the truck for metalwork, aside from the door. We'll come back and tackle the doors at another day. I'm probably going to have to order a couple more panels. I was hoping I'd just smudge some fiberglass or something on the bottom, but they're a little bit too far gone for that. Moving along. Alright, we're just about ready to weld this inner rocker on here. Got everything mocked up, looking decent. I did end up getting the cobbler's wheel out, cutting me up another piece up front. Here's where my flat panel stopped. There's a shape here. I didn't like this hole, especially when cab mount is right in that area. So we went and cut a little extension panel. This is cut to fit tight up against the floor and bridge the gap between the floor, come on now, and this rocker. So we'll fit snug up here. We'll clamp it down here. A couple Rosetta Stone welds here in the middle, and then the cab mount will sandwich that all down. Do have the cab mount shot full of holes, so I can come back and plug weld all those. Now, got my edge marked up here, where I'll hit it with a grinder and clean up that paint. Prefer to go with the plug welds here because from the factory they use spot welds, and that just kind of spreads out the stress a little bit better than welding along the edge of this thing. We got one more thing to do before we can weld that on, aside from cleaning. You can see inside here there's no fasteners. That's how they come. I think, maybe. I don't know if these, don't remember if these were spacers or if this is actually the nut plate that was there before. But we're gonna cut out a piece of metal about this size, and then I dug through my spare stash of slightly used fasteners, and I'm gonna weld a nut to a plate. I don't think I'm gonna use this crusty fella. I'm gonna dig through the scrap pile of plate and make us a new one. Alright, well, we got our filet metal here. I believe there's some particular parts been in there for at least 10 years, so yeah, we can use it now. You're gonna make a weld plate or nut plate, make sure you leave yourself a little bit of breathing room, because you're not gonna be able to get this thing center, but not too much that you're gonna lose the flange on your fastener. I'm glad I dug through the pile and found a flange nut that'll be better for welding, and it's probably close to what was in here before. So I'm going to use this as a body mount bolt. I'll probably ruin that came with the LMC truck body mounts, but I'm going to use that to kind of hold this together when I weld it. I've got this other nut here I'm going to use for a backer, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to eyeball this to center and then tighten the nut down on top that I want to weld down, and then that will serve as my jig. Sometimes you can get lucky and just eyeball these together without a bolt, but not usually. So since I can't see how I'm spaced, I'm going to get just about to tight and then kind of wiggle it around and make sure that I'm not on the edge. So edge, 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 kind of come halfway back in the middle and then snug it down. Worst case Ontario, I could get in there with a burr and clean it up, but if I can get this bolt out after it's welded, should be fine. Make sure I got my metric adjustable wrench out today. I'll go weld her up.
There should be. You just give it a little bit of a Krylon touch before it's stuck in the basement of the truck for the rest of its life. Bake down finish. Not sure how much it'll show up on the camera here, but did have a little bit of step. Fairly even for my eyeball. So, let this paint dry up while we're crawling back underneath the truck. And this will be ready to pop down into the can, and that plate will keep it from turning as we're cranking stuff down. Just a quick note as I'm prepping this area, getting ready to put this body mount up in here. You want to clean up whatever this black coating is that comes on your parts. Sometimes it's just sometimes it's e-coat, sometimes it's, I don't know. What I'm showing you is I scratched this up by hand with 80 grit sandpaper because I didn't plan ahead and I didn't clean up inside there. But I didn't want to strip all this panel out because, you know, painting upside down is fun. But thing to note here is I can scratch that off by hand very easily, so don't count on this coating to last very long. Make sure you take time to paint over this stuff. This is not, it's very thin, so put something else over there for some extra protection. We'll probably hit this up with some Crust-Oleum or some Krylon or Duplicolor or something later. Hey, we're getting things wrapped up here for this video. I'm going to leave off with the rockers, cap corner, all welded in place. Came back and did the seam sealer on it. I'm going to come through and pop a bolt up from the bottom. This is one stud that I had to cut. Other than that, I'm done welding panels into the floor and the rockers on this side. Not stingy with the seam sealer, no reason to be. Come back and I'll probably brush some paint over that, but I'll wait till the other side's done. Definitely got some mud and some stuff to do, but I'm ready to go on to the other side. Rocker's going to be a similar story, but I do not have the floor to do. If I remember right, I got rocker and body mount. We are sitting on the new body mounts here. Just took the wire brush real quick to the spots I wouldn't get to again, but slather these with Never Seas pretty good. So if I do have to loosen this up, lift the body up a little bit to get back and clean some of this up later, I can do that. I just don't want to spend the time right now detailing the underside of this thing. It will need some paint and such later, but see all the seam sealer here. Definitely will be painting that sooner than later since there's some bare metal there. You can see the seam sealer I put down before I tacked the floor down. My tack's burning through the undercoating. Don't want to zoom in too much on some of the welding on here because depending on what we're looking at, anywhere between 5 and 20 years ago is when I did it. So varying levels of ability, as would be with anybody I assume. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this time on Town Line Garage. We got plenty more to do on this truck and other things around here. So if you want to keep up on what's going on, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. Appreciate that. And do appreciate you watching. Till next time, keep it between the ditches. Adios.